People whose NDA expired. What can you disclose? Manipulation of data to give false impressions of reliability was something I saw quite blatantly utilized with little repercussions. My company was struggling to meet on-time delivery schedules, and for numerous years was as embarrassingly low as 40%. A new manager comes in, and within months we are now boasting an on-time delivery rate on a brilliant 95%. Turns out all he did was change what constituted an on-time delivery. Each time we knew a product would be late, we'd notify the customer of the delay and ask them to confirm they still wanted the order. If they still wanted the product, the on-time delivery would be recorded against the new expected date as opposed to the original promise date. Company literature was being sent out boasting of our 95% on-time delivery, now amongst the highest in the industry, when in fact we were by that point meeting less than 30% of initial delivery schedule targets. It was so simple that I'm sure numerous companies are getting away with such underhand tricks. About 20 years, I signed an NDA with a very large record company regarding their attempts to get into selling their catalog online, streaming, sales, etc. It was a minefield because they were still wary of pissing off high street retailers, and that's where the charts came from. These attempts were frustrated by their top-level corporate guys. One week they all went to a what is an MP3 conference in Buenos Aires to get them up to speed. The thing is, they spent so much time partying, the only talk which seemed to stick was the scare tactics about how teens could scrape MP3s from the web, and they could be copied and redistributed easily. When they came back, every item in the catalog was ordered to be scrubbed from the web. Number 30-second previews. Nothing should be audible. Not a hint of audio. Lock it all down. Put all the tapes in a chest and seal it with concrete at the bottom of the sea. That's going to make everyone go back to CDs. Good old profitable CDs. I briefly worked at a university in South Florida in the late 90s and early aughts. I was chosen to be on an academic integrity team, basically reviewing claims of plagiarism and cheating and deciding between the 5 of us whether it is valid or not. We were made to sign NDAs when we accepted the invite to be a part of the team. There were 3 instances where an employee that was taking classes there clearly cheated, and the issue was brought to our attention. Those 3 times, the cheating was blatant. All 3 times, we were told to let it go, as it would look bad for the university to have it get out. I'm not sure if this is common for other universities, but at the time, I was under the impression that it was common practice everywhere. It was ultimately one of the main reasons I ended up quitting. I wasn't still disgusted by it. I worked at a grocery store. We had lots of prepackaged produce and other baked goods. I was told to pull off all the expiration date stickers and replace them with new dates because they still look good. There were so many things they did that probably could have gotten them fined heavily if I had known better and reported them. They were a local chain that had like 10 stores. Apparently, they only have 1 store left now and are very close to going out of business for good according to my parents. I don't know if I was ever bound by an NDA for this, but I used to work for a contractor for a major US plane manufacturer. They will literally hire anyone. I'm an ancient historian. I do Roman stuff. My experience in flight is limited to sims and being a passenger. They have no standard for aeronautics for their teachers. Their techs, I don't know. Not really exposing a secret here, but I am disgusted by it. My job requires me to look into the minutes of meetings. One of my clients was a school. During one of the meetings with the board of directors and the parents, they addressed the bullying in the school. One of the parents said, "Just leave it. Let the weak ones fall out." And that was the end of it. I worked for a very prominent sports broadcast. Hardcore fans would always get so angry when the broadcast was narrative-focused, but the reality is that majority of viewership metrics aren't that hardcore minority that are so extremely vocal on things like social media and Reddit that would complain about narratives, etc. Production meetings weekly were about key words and key narrative lines to essentially sell these teams and players to the audience over and over and over, because majority of viewers only tune in for a moment or a game, so you gotta repeat it to make it stick. And it did work in terms of those narratives actually sticking and building player brands. So much was manufactured and about working together with broadcast and teams to build fandom. That is the #1 goal. Could we go massively in depth on a hardcore level? Yeah, and the talent team always wanted to, but production had the data and was like, the fandom immediately turns off when we do that. So I guess the dirty secret is, sports broadcasts, hardcore analytical fans are never the target demographic. Probably not a secret, but some sport fans really miss that LOL. A ridiculous percentage of the US bullets are made in Grand Island, Nebraska. Not just the red boxes, either just about every company has a large amount of bullets made for them there. Sierra and Nosler being the 2 exceptions. The only difference most of the time is the color of the tips. Wouldn't be so bad, but the equipment is WW vintage and falling apart, security and safety are half-assed, and they chase off anyone that won't work 70-hour weeks. Financial institutions push their own portfolio solutions, knowing they are inferior investment vehicles to other investments they offer. They make more money off them. They pay the advisor more money for their proprietary funds, which are often available for much cheaper fees through direct brokerage. The secret isn't banking that their profit comes before yours always. There isn't a bank on the street that hasn't prioritizing selling you a better investment over their own, more expensive version. You don't get advice. You get sold. Hasbro has tried to make the following two films: Stretch Armstrong, a gritty re-imaging starring Taylor Lautner, The Wolf from Twilight, with a Nolan's Batman feel Candyland, a Lautner-style epic for children starring Adam Sandler. Both got pitch packets made before ultimately being shelved. Last I heard, the Candyland idea is still kind of alive. In a tech support role, one manager used to boast his team's average call times were the lowest in the company. While average call times were in the 12 to 17-minute range, his team was constantly under 10 minutes. His team was awarded multiple times, and his strategy was adopted company-wide to all customer service and technical support teams, including our internal IT teams. That strategy was under a strict NDA, as we did not want to allow competitors to emulate it. When our call center would go bid on contracts, it became an awesome metric. Our customer satisfaction scores are on par, but we have call times 20 to 30% lower than our competitors. The dirty secret of the NDA that I was not allowed to disclose? Their big method? Just hang up on people. Straight up. Find a way to say, okay, go ahead and do that, and call back if it doesn't fix it. Then hang up. Don't wait for confirmation. Okay, so reboot your PC, and your problem should be solved. Thanks for calling. Click. Eventually, they came out with more useful metrics that track things like first call resolution, which absolutely shredded this company, and they went out of business a year or two later. In Prince George's County, Maryland, county transit bus drivers are instructed following an accident they are not to speak to anyone until a supervisor arrives on the scene. An approved method for not talking, especially to other drivers involved, is to feign injury. There's actually money allotted to pay the fines related to wasting 911 and emergency resources, because analysts determined it was cheaper than costs associated with drivers accidentally admitting fault. There's also an entire audit and analysis team related to accidents because of the sheer volume of people who falsely claim to be on a bus during an accident. Worked at a hospital specializing in cancer care. They were doing something new, actually targeting the type of cancer with the right type of chemo. Most cancer centers do not. So suppose you get cancer C, but the insurance company/gov mandates you get chemo for cancer AB before treatment for C. As the money increases by like tenfold, downside for the patient with cancer C is they have to endure way more bouts of chemo than if they just targeted cancer C. So if you ever find yourself in that really bad boat, make sure your doctor's treatment plan is for the right cancer vice for the wrong checkbook. What can a patient do to make sure they're getting the right treatment? I mean, I could ask my doctor, but they'd always say yes regardless. Many years ago, my dad was manager of the meat department at a chain grocery store. A new store manager came in and told him that whenever steaks started looking a bit gray, rather than mark them down a bit, they were still okay to eat, just older and unappealing in appearance. He was to slice them laterally and position the bright pink interior up to repackage and keep them the same price. My dad soon quit over that, as he couldn't in good conscience do it. I used to work in packaging, and there was a big promotion coming up for the 18 World Cup. Basically, the beverage company we were working with thought they'd be able to sell more of their product if they were able to correctly predict the winning team to use for their promotion when the winner was actually revealed. Obviously, if you waited for the champion to be revealed, it would be too late. The supply chain has got to start well in advance. Basically, the beverage company did correctly guess champion team, and a lot of people involved in this deal had to sign NDAs basically stipulating that they couldn't go around shouting, "I know France are going to win because XYZ company have asked us to print all this France merch in advance, etc., etc." You don't have to be Nostradamus to guess the champion of the World Cup, but it's the fact the company we were dealing with were suspiciously certain of it, along with the secrecy surrounding this knowledge. I was never under an NDA, but the hotel is under new ownership, so I guess I can say it now. The hotel had no internet connection starting around 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., like clockwork, every night. If it was just a system fault, or if it was cost-cutting. But without internet, the security cameras didn't work or record anything. The fire alarm system doesn't work either. The alarms go off, but it doesn't call for help. So if we had a fire that started at 3 a.m., for example, then unless someone else that's driving by calls it in, I have no idea what's happening. One night we had an assault happen in the parking lot. The police needed camera evidence, and our cameras didn't record anything because the internet was out. So that was fun explaining to the detectives. Used to work for government. One of the department heads didn't realize his mic was still on during a meeting break and said some less than flattering things about his colleagues. He came to me the next day and wanted it removed from the tape and made it very clear that my career would be limited if I didn't oblige. I obliged, though I had already made a copy to my personal server earlier that morning, just to have leverage in the future should I need it. I worked for Hewlett-Packard about 15 years ago testing all their printers. I had to sign a 10-year NDA saying I wouldn't reveal their trade secrets. Their printers sucked then and they suck now too. I'm not an engineer, so I could never tell you how the printers work anyway, or rather don't work. Worked in a high-fashion warehouse for a while as a supervisor. I'm sure a lot of people already assumed it, but it literally doesn't not matter if it's a $10 brand or a $1,000 brand. It goes through the same process, quality control and utility is all identical. Delivery priority may be given to a more premium brand if it happens to crash with another brand, but that's about it. It really is just a different label/logo being overcharged by a crazy percent. The user experience is better though. Instead of delivering it late, you let them know beforehand. Not that it's an excuse to fudge metrics. In my job, we had a lot of issues. The thing is, they weren't our team's issues, but another system's, and we would help out all the time and didn't really care whose issue it was. In comes a metric-focused manager and says we don't help anyone. We're a great group now, but company is worse off. I have a friend who's a successful independent graphic artist. One day he gets a call from a rep of a major US company. He's like, fuck, thinking one of his designs is too close to theirs. Not usually a big deal, but would mean pulling the work down or changing it before trying to sell it again. Anyways, calls the rep back, and it was the other way around. They found a graphic they used was a potential rip-off of one of his images for sale and compensated him in a way he found fair. Something similar happened to a friend of mine in high school. He had made some sort of 3D scientific model for a research project/product he had been working on. It was a diagnostic tool, and one of those crime TV shows had blatantly stolen it for one of their episodes. They even used the YouTube video he had made showing it off. When he reached out, they offered him a similar amount of money and sent him a very rude reply when he told them that they were being ridiculous. What they didn't realize was that his mother was a prominent lawyer and had already gotten a bunch of his stuff trademarked or copyrighted. So when she reached out to them and pointed it out, they understandably freaked out. Funniest part was that my friend would have let them use it for free if they had reached out and asked. Not accusing you, but I saw something very similar to this on Twitter a month or two ago. A college-age woman posted side by sides of her asset versus an asset from a video game, I think it was. She called them out and they basically said the same thing. Freelancer added it into some spec materials and the company didn't realize it wasn't original art. They offered to change their model. Not sure what happened after. How often is this shit happening? Because it seems to be happening a lot. This doesn't surprise me. I'll keep the story short, but I as a student had a situation where I had to petition something. I had over 30 pages of documentation, only for my petition to be denied, and the reason for the denial being confidential. I had to get several other people involved, including my college's ombudsperson and several department heads. I was directed to an appeals process, where I submitted a 90-page appeal for it to be rejected again for confidential reasons. I then found out that there was supposed to be a student representative on the appeals committee, but because he was my suite mate a year earlier, he was not allowed to speak on my behalf, and there was no replacement. I eventually was forwarded to someone in the provost's office who spoke to someone and got my appeal approved by the end of the day. I feel that they didn't want me to go any deeper, as I had said that I was looking at options of sending things to the local news and filling a FOIA request, and I had been dealing with this situation for a year at that point and hadn't given up yet. Finance, law, and medical are the biggest users of legacy hardware and software. The uniting factor of those industries? They can all be held financially and criminally liable if they screw something up, so they're very risk-averse to adopting new technology when the existing stuff is getting the job done reliably. That's widely known, no NDA needed. There have been COBOL boot camps all around America since around 2015, as COBOL stopped being taught at the university level in the mid-90s, and the majority of COBOL programmers are at past or damn near retirement age. They are slowly migrating COBOL code, though, and are at the breakpoint of now or never. Guy in our cargo handling warehouse was manually unloading a curtain-sided trailer filled with metal pipes. The load shifted and rolled him off the side of the trailer, pinning him to the ground. After months of sickness, he came back to work and applied for compensation. The company stated that he hadn't hurt himself at work, so he sued for compensation, and his lawyer demanded the security recordings of him having to unload a trailer on his own, totally against the company's own HSE rules. The company then claimed the security records had been overwritten, wiped, destroyed in a freak nuclear explosion. Anything to get out of the court seeing them. Unfortunately, my mate had a friend who worked in HR, and she copied the CDs and gave them to him. So in court, when the legal rep for the company told the judge that the security recordings had been lost, mate's lawyer had the joy of standing up and telling the judge that this wasn't a problem. He had copies himself. According to Insider Lady in HR, the company took the original CDs out into the car park and burned them. Just dealt with a black mold problem in an apartment complex. Found it on the walk through after stupidly signing a lease first. They ignored me when I brought it up repeatedly. I got the city involved talking to the high-ups in the company. The 180 they did after that was hilarious. They refunded everything and canceled my lease. You could almost smell the panic in the emails. Used to deliver for a bakery in the early 2000s. If you wanted something less common like red velvet or gluten-free, you got Betty Crocker, as they didn't have the volume to make a profit on all the ingredients necessary. Nowadays, the bakery makes their own gluten-free, as it is far more common. I saw on a cooking or baking sub here that lots of cake professionals use store-bought cake mixes, but they add an extra egg and substitute milk or buttermilk for water and butter for oil. This gives it more of a consistency of cake made from scratch. They have no standard for aeronautics for their teachers. Teaching is a skill set many engineers don't have. It makes sense they would hire a teacher for training. That's standard in a lot of industries. I work in healthcare. Most of our trainers aren't doctors, nurses, etc. Doctors and nurses write the material, then our trainers package it up and deliver it. LOL. Wife had a stint in a call center for a massage place. Most of the customers/regulars had normal notes. Gets X package every X weeks or schedule for Friday only. But there was one guy that did nothing but harass the staff, talking about feet, asking to be tickled, how naked he could be. The weirdest part is the guy was in another state and would call different portions of the franchise just to troll. Most customers would have a page of comments, maybe two. This weirdo had 49 pages of complaints from staff members and notes regarding bans at massage locations across the whole US. I worked at a company that had both call centers and in-person stuff, and it had a typical customer management system, so we could look up past orders, warranty repairs, phone calls, etc. It also let us leave notes for customers used for typical things like goes by Ben, but legal name is Benjamin. There was also a secret code we all used to let other employees know who the jerks were. An asterisk was asshole because it looked like a puckered butthole. It meant they were easily confused/confusing. It meant they talked on and would generally waste your time. Plus was they were happy, positive people, and good to work with. There were plenty of others, but I don't remember them all. All I know is you pull up a customer's info and see, and at the bottom of their notes, you knew you'd be in for a bad time. They manipulate data internally too, LOL. Even in these Goliath companies, there's a hierarchy of bloodthirsty people. A team lead wants to look good to their director, who wants to look good to their MD, who wants to look good to their AVP, who wants to look good to the VP, or C-level who wants to look good to the board, who wants to look good to stockholders. The data people at the bottom can practically answer any question with their unfathomable. And I do not mean that as a hyperbole. It truly is crazy how much they have amount of data, which then goes to their boss. If they don't like it, at whatever level, they will indirectly ask them to look back into it until it fits some narrative. This just keeps going until everybody is satisfied. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.